we go.
Happy Wednesday, everybody.
Happy Wednesday.
We're back with Amrit Sadhana for part 2.
Yes.
Hey, girl. Hey.
Hi.
Before we get into it, let's do the pet peeves. Mark, go.
This week, I was at the Children's Museum with little Zion,
Oh, I know what's
who had a wonderful time. And we were at this water table, which, you know, him and water.
Mm-hmm.
And he found this little ladle and he like rolled up to this little empty space of the water table, having a grand old time, just playing in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And then two people, little people, one probably around, I would say 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
I assume the sister, a little bit younger. The little man proceeded to have a little boat and was coming by Zion. And rather than like stopping and then going around, he lifted his arm up over Zion's head so that the boat was still in the water and proceeded to like shuffle past Zion.
Mm-hmm.
The little girl decided, nah, I am just going to take my boat and bulldoze through Zion, knocking him to the floor. So, of course, I yell out, hey, the little girl whips around. I'm like, please be careful. Little girl looks away and proceeds on her way, probably knocking over other kids. So then I scan the room looking for the parents. I see this dad. I catch his eye and I'm like, are these your kids? And he's like, absolutely not. And it wasn't until about 5-10 minutes later where we're finally away from the area. Do I notice 2 women in the hallway chatting to each other, kids running up to them, finally ready to leave.
So what's your pet peeve?
My pet peeve is
Where
when you enter into spaces and you bring your kids, other parents are not there to kind of control your kids. That's your job. Your job is to control your kids, to teach them right or wrong, to teach them lessons on how to socialize, not the other parents in the room. That is my pet peeve.
I mean, if I were to modify your pet peeve, which I am not your therapist, but I would say like it's less about like parents, you're there to control your children, but it's more like you should at least have your eyes on your kids in a public place that is very crowded, especially on a Sunday morning. Anything could happen. We live in a wild world where someone can snatch your kid, hurt your kid, roofie your kid, like literally anything could happen. For me, it's less about the like controlling of behavior, more about like your job is to keep your eyes on your child, to know where they are and what they're doing and who's around them. And then by extension, like whoop their ass if they're like being mean to other kids.
Right, but that's the thing, right? They're teachable moments.
That other people are going to look after and protect your children too. Like that's unsafe.
Like it is not 1950. Like yes. Yeah. Like let's.
And also kids were being abducted in 1950 too.
Thank you, girl. Yes. I even this morning when Adara and I were at the playground, there are just moments where we are mid-sentence and stop talking because it's like, where's my child? Or like, my child is now running away. I'm going, like, the conversation between the moms is not more important than the safety of the boys. Like, we can text, we can talk anytime. I agree. It's a pet peeve.
Yes.
I just needed to.
I
wanted to like
you need
say
to Capricorn correct it.
I mean, yes. Because whatever version, I think it must be, is it my like Leo rising that does this? Because we're both Capricorns, but we're very different.
I can't remember what you never sent me Mark's information so I could look up his chart.
Oh, crap.
I can't remember what your moon, and
I don't remember what my moon is.
Are you a Leo rising?
I'm a Leo rising.
Yeah. That's like that. Actually, that checks out that you're like rising in the most positive way ever, because
why? Tell me more.
Like Leo risings have a magnetism about them, like a radiance, a confidence. People are so attracted to them. They want to be like you have this just like a warm presence. You just radiate like sunshine.
Oh, I
Because
love
Leo's ruled by I have a
this.
Leo moon. So like it's a little different in the moon placement, but
Yeah.
yeah, that checks out.
Okay. So you have to give Amrit, like, what is it? Your date of birth, time of birth, and
And place
location.
of birth. Yes.
Okay.
And I'll look
Uh,
up your whole chart and then
Yeah.
and then Ashley and I will analyze.
Done.
Yes.
Done.
This is great. It's kind of like a love languages kind of thing,
It's
right?
kind of like, it's so funny because a few years back, I was raised by the hippies. And so I've known about astrology since I can remember. Like we had an
Wow.
astrology book when I was young. And I read like a few years back that people who are super into astrology, like enneagrams, like personality, like all of that,
Yeah.
it's because they felt very misunderstood as children and they never felt like they fit in. And so they have this desire to want to deeply understand other people and themselves. And I'm like, listen, I don't need you to be so loud about
Yeah, that tracks.
it. Totally tracks. And like, I don't put everything into astrology, but like, honestly, like some of it's so like, because it's so nuanced. It's not just like your sun, your moon, and your rising. It's like, what house is it in? What planet rules that house? What degree is it at? And it's like, sometimes even everything down to traumas can literally like be in your chart. It's
Wow.
pretty
Wow.
fascinating. It's pretty
Wow.
fascinating.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
I love that. It's kind of like, maybe this is my brain always wanting to search for some kind of certainty, but like I love that it's just like this snapshot in time, right? That like this millisecond that you were born and where everything in the universe was the moment you were born. It's just, I kind of like the uniqueness, the certainty, the
It's
specialness of
cool.
it. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
cool.
It's why when people are like, oh, I just don't really like relate to like my sun sign, it's like, okay, well, let's look at like your other placements, because depending on like what planets rule them, again, what houses they're in, et cetera, that can be determinant. Like maybe your sun sign's not your strongest placement.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just like, I'm also like, I'm a Scorpio and I have 4 planets in Scorpio. So I just want to get down to the core and into the dark of everything and bring it to light.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. No arguments from me. But I think that's a good thing. I think it's a special kind of person that wants to like dig deep like that. Not everybody wants to go
I'm
there.
not into surface level conversations,
Hey,
you know?
I love it. No small talk. Don't go on Instagram and like DM her trying to chit chat. Like she's not, we're not having that. Okay. My pet peeve. We've gone
So we've gone way off.
way over.
And thank you for this week's episode. We're done now.
No, my pet peeve this week, um, I talked about this on an earlier episode this season, but I feel like I have to bring it back to light because I'm like seeing some things on Instagram that are just like getting on my nerves. Um, I, it just, it bothers me, the privilege of people thinking that we're all on the same level, or like we're all at the same starting point, or we all have the same 24 hours in a day, or we all have the same resources, or this idea of like, if you just work hard enough, if you just make the time, if you just da 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 da. And I see it a lot, just because of like who I follow and like where I am in the world, right? But I see it a lot with fitness people in particular, wellness people in particular. And it's like, do y'all realize how privileged this all is just to begin with? Like, do you realize that like there are gyms that have sliding scales? There are gyms
Yeah.
that like the Planet Fitnesses of the world exist for a reason, right? $10 memberships exist for a reason, or YMCAs exist for a reason. It's not all $40 classes and fucking Lululemon pants. And it just is driving me crazy because I feel like it's so discouraging because someone can look at that content and be like, well, what's wrong with me that I'm not able to do it? And by someone, I also mean myself, even though I recognize the bullshit, like it does make me sometimes look within and be like, okay, am I missing something? Like, did I not try hard enough? Did I mess up my schedule? Should I have blah, blah, blah? And it's just like, bitch, you're also just like, you're a human and you're living life. And like, like it's not going to be that easy every day to just do your thing. So that very much is a pet peeve of mine this week. I had like another thing that I wanted to tack onto that. Oh, the other part of it that gets on my nerves is that it's like, okay, well, if you can apply this sort of ease to fitness, then where the fuck is your anti-racism work? If it's all so easy and all you
There you
need to
go.
do is just
There you
make
go.
time for it, right? Then like, where's your allyship?
Because that's the kind of discomfort people want to sink into, is when they get washboard abs and a big ass, but they don't want to do things that actually is going to create a safer space for everybody in this country.
Yep.
It's like,
Period. Absolutely.
really, like,
So I'm just
yeah.
like, okay.
Oh, I don't have
okay,
time. You don't
I
have
see you.
time. You don't have 10 minutes to read a chapter from an anti-racism book and
Right.
then
Take
write
it
an
into the
email about
bathroom
how
while
it
you're
makes you-
taking a
Yeah,
shit.
exactly. Like,
Read a chapter.
come on.
That's mom life. Like I say, hi, I have to go poop. And that's how I send emails. I sent you a voicemail from the shower yesterday or like
Literally
a couple days
shower.
ago.
It felt like you were in a slob.
I'm like, listen, this is my chance. I am alone and this is the time. No excuses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
What's yours this
Like
week?
a couple floating around. I think I'm gonna go with, I think that how much quicker misinformation spreads than truth, how
Oh, I
Mm,
much
love that.
misinformation is on social media, and how not everybody deserves a platform.
damn.
And I think I think it's not to say that not everybody's voice matters, but like the amount of people on social media right now talking about diet and food who have zero credentials
Oh
and
my God. Oh my
being
God.
paid by a supplement company or own a supplement company, like, fruit's not bad for you. Eat that shit up. It's so good for you. Like, like,
Yes. Yes.
just don't listen to people who are telling you that there are good and bad foods, that seed oils are bad, that like if you actually look at a lot of the research that people are presenting as like studies, they're all inconclusive. Usually it's like more information is needed, and all it's all coming from white-bodied mouths. And what pisses me off the most is, if you notice, the things that are the most accessible, the most affordable, are the things that are bad for you.
Yep.
Iceberg lettuce doesn't have enough nutrients in it. Canola oil, bad for, like, causes inflammation. Do you want to know what actually causes inflammation? You stressing over accidentally eating some canola oil.
That is so real. Oh my
Like,
gosh. Yes.
it literally infuriates me. And I think it infuriates me even more because I'm going to admit to something. I used to be an anti-vaxxer. I used to be that person.
No way.
I did.
Like during COVID or like
So
other
COVID and anti-racism work is what changed my perspective.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my
So
gosh.
I realized when COVID first happened and I was looking at who was going to be getting the vaccine and who wasn't. And again, personal choice.
Right.
But I realized how privileged it is to decide not to get vaccinated, and how it can there are some people who can't make the choice to not do that because it's too big of a risk.
Yep. Yep.
And who don't have access to the care if they do get sick. And the judgment that was coming from the people who choose not to towards the people who do. And again, like, also, like, I wasn't going to be caught dead without a mask as a white woman, like that. Like, it all really came from this immense place of privilege and not actually knowing how to read the science and study the science, and growing up in, you know, a hippie environment where like those things weren't necessarily like again, it was just a total privilege. And
Yeah.
I am no longer, I can probably say I'm no longer an anti-vaxxer.
Thank you, Jesus,
I
because I
also
don't want
didn't
to
have
be friends
kids. So
with.
the thing
I don't
is
want to
like
be
I
friends
was
with that.
vaccinated as a kid, and like I don't have kids, so it's not like I was like ever actively, but I was truly that person who was like, I will never vaccinate my children. And now I'm like, yeah,
Wow.
it's such a hot topic. People get so
Oh yeah.
heated on it. But I invite people who might be on the fence or whatever to just really look at the fact that, sure, if you're in an affluent area and you have money and your kids in private school and all these things, it might be like that might be something you choose to do. But there are children who don't live in those areas, who have to go to daycare, who aren't in private schools, who, you know, live in public housing, and it's not the environments that are necessarily supportive of the strongest immune system. And that's not a choice that they can even choose to make. It's a privilege to be able to even choose to do that.
Yeah.
So like the misinformation, but what got me there was the misinformation, and how the misinformation can be so intoxicating.
Yeah.
Because you can
It's
find studies that support it. I
That's the
use air
thing.
quotes, by the way,
That is
guys.
exactly the thing.
yeah, I
It's
mean
air
it
quotes.
it hits people in a way that, you know, it's almost LOL, like who I'm talking to. It's almost like when people join cults, right? I mean, the audience doesn't know that, so I don't want to like give anything away. But like it's the first thing I think of, right? Is like when you're looking for something, or when you're looking for a thought or a feeling or a way of living that you want validated, like you can find that. You could find a community for
Information
that,
bias.
right?
You want to feel like you belong somewhere, that your way of thinking, and like it's when I started to look at the demographic, and I'm not saying there aren't non-white people who choose
Of
not to,
course. Yeah.
Right.
but when I was starting to see the loudest voices, it's like the non-white people choosing not to get the vaccine weren't loud about it. They just chose not to get it.
Anyways,
So
my pet peeve is misinformation. And the privilege rooted in misinformation, and how misinformation spreads far faster than truth, because somebody sees clickbait and then they share that, and then it gets shared, and it's just like so frustrating, because it's like, where's the critical thinking?
none.
Yeah, critical thinking and curiosity, and not
Yeah.
just within the echo chamber that you exist in,
Yeah.
but
Yes.
like actually allowing yourself to do some discovery outside of that.
Yeah, but like even I was reading about this today, when we've gotten so used to not wanting to have disagreements at all, that we just, anyone who doesn't agree with us, like we don't even want to engage with them. We don't want to be friends with them. We don't want to get into arguments with them. We don't want to change our views, open up our minds, nothing. And people are just like, I think more than ever before, creating their own echo chambers, because they just
Yeah.
don't even want anything
Yes.
else infiltrating.
Again, it's
Yeah,
it's that resistance to any type of discomfort. Like, conflict resolution is
Yes.
such an important tool to have. And it's like, you do like, I mean, you do see it all over social media of like, oh, this friend just didn't serve me anymore. And it's like, so is your friend only there to serve you? Like, I get what you're saying there, but like people are starting to like kind of cut off and like just
Yeah.
walk away and set a boundary before even looking at and like looking at where they can take accountability, and where things can
Yes.
go through, and where like conflict resolution can happen. And it's kind of concerning, because
Mhm.
it's like, that's how community stays strong, is through conflict resolution.
That everybody's not supposed to agree. We're not
No.
all supposed to be the same. And let me also clarify, although I don't think at this point any racist listeners are surviving this podcast, but like,
Probably.
I'm also just like, we can disagree on like, you know, not racist stuff. Like
Yeah,
there are
when it
certain
comes
things
to
that like
human
there's no
rights,
argument. Yeah.
yeah, like if you're voting against the actual lives of people that I love and care about, that's a
Yes.
different thing.
Yes, that is not a conflict resolution. Like that is something else. But you know, what kind of wine you like, what kind of
Yeah.
plants you have in your house, you know, like things like that. How do you cut your peanut butter and jelly? Is it diagonal or is it straight? We can disagree.
It's gotta be diagonal.
I
Anyway,
see. So Ashley and I got into this like a long time ago because my mom always cut mine straight and I didn't
Me
like it
too.
straight. So I like it
Oh.
diagonal because
Yeah.
I felt like the cool kids always had it cut diagonal at school.
Oh, for me, I just felt like it's just a simpler cut to
Plus, you
go
can get the
straight.
corner in. Like it's easier to eat because the corner's smaller, so you can get it.
Plus you can make better shapes. So if you have two triangles, like you can do
Oh my
geometrical
God.
things with them. Like
All right. Well, next week, my pet peeve is going to be how people cut their
Their
sandwiches.
sandwiches.
Here's your preview, everyone. Stay tuned.
but bringing this back in
Okay,
all
bring it back.
seriousness, right? I mean, I think there is a very fine line between boundaries and bridges.
Yes.
And I
Mhm.
think, right, going back to how you started this, and like as a white person, or trying to be an ally, like part of the role is to try to be a bridge, right? How can you influence the minds of people who don't see other ways? And once you get a signal that there is no changing a mind, that's where a boundary can come up. But
Yes.
I do think that the more people that can embrace their role as a bridge versus like this very rigid hardline boundary, the more transformation we're going to actually drive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that. So there's like a couple of things that I want to talk about in this conversation. One is Ayurveda, because I just find it fascinating. And he asked me if I wanted ice in my water yesterday, and I was like, no,
Yeah. You're like, Amrit said no.
no, don't put any ice in my water. I'm like, you're going to mess up my whole digestive system. So we need to talk about Ayurveda
Yes, we
because
do.
I can't explain it well. And I know Mark is like super interested. So we need to talk about that. And I also, if you're open to it, would love to talk a little bit about your upbringing, whatever
Yeah,
you're comfortable
yeah.
sharing, of
I
course.
mean, it kind of leads into it. Like, so to preface, like, I'm not an Ayurvedic practitioner. I have just been living parts of an Ayurvedic lifestyle since I was about 8 years old. Um, I grew up in a cult. Around 8 is when my mom started getting really involved. And then I'm a trigger warning, but I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And something I recently learned in my recovery is that one of the traits of children who do that is they throw themselves into a religion. And so because by the time I was old enough of like age of memory, like my mom was like super born again Christian before. And so she kind of throws herself into cults.
Interesting. Okay.
And so it's I mean, the organization's called 3HO, but I grew up Sikh. And it was a kind of a bastardized version of Sikhism though, because this guy kind of, I mean, I could talk about this for a really long time of how he used pillars of white supremacy to kind of pit the white people who converted against the Punjabi community, which breaks my heart now that I think about it.
Wow.
Because he would be like, see, the white people do it better than you. They're more devoted. They're more, and like now I'm like, oh my, it truly breaks my heart. And so my deconstructing the last like few years has been realizing like how much cultural appropriation I participated with that I had no idea I was participating with, because I just thought I was like following a religion.
Yeah.
So like this is very nuanced, but so like Ayurveda, if you're completely unfamiliar, it's a lot of times referred to as the sister science of yoga, and it's one of the oldest written like medical systems, for lack of better word in the world. It's based off of like life in balance. So everybody has a dosha or a body type, and it can be a combination of the different doshas or just one of them. And you can also have an imbalance. You can have an imbalance of too much heat in your system, too much air in your system, too much like too watery. And the whole point of it is finding that balance. And the idea is that all illness and all disease is rooted from imbalances within our body, both emotional and physical. And so
Okay.
Ashley, talking about the ice water thing, you like ice water is kind of a big no-no, or cold, like really cold things in general are kind of a big no-no because your digestive system is looked at as a furnace, and you don't want to stoke that furnace too much to make it too hot, because then you're going to have too much heat in your system. And you don't want to put it out so that it's too cold, because then you're going to have too much air, too much water in your system. And so ice water, even though we think on a hot day, like iced coffee, iced water, iced tea is just going to be the most refreshing thing, it actually cools down your system, and your body has to work really hard to heat it up to even be able to access it and use it. So it actually creates additional heat in your system. So like Ayurveda is,
Fascinating.
That is
it's
so
super
fascinating.
fascinating, and it makes sense. Ayurveda is one of the most like nuanced and intricate like systems, because it's really breaks down to like the individual and what they've got going on, and like how you treat it from there. And it's truly like a lifestyle. So like oil pulling's become really trending. It's gotten really appropriated. I've oil pulled since I was like 14 years old. It's a way of like taking care of your oral and health care. Cold showers are also rooted in several different places. They actually also go back to like cold therapy goes back to like ancient Egypt as well. But there's a lot of things now that are kind of like integrating into like the wellness world that are rooted in Ayurveda, but nobody actually like talks about the roots in Ayurveda, which is like really sad. So like it gets lost.
Yeah.
Can I ask maybe a really nuanced question? Because you just
Yeah.
kind of mentioned it, and it was like the first thing that popped into my head when Ash mentioned this. So, like, cold water ingestion or ice water ingestion is a no-no,
Yes.
but cold showers are an absolute great thing,
Yeah.
right? So is it about the ingestion that makes it bad,
Yeah,
or
because like it's like going into your stomach, and your body has to use it to heat it up, whereas your body has to so cold showers are like a really beautiful nervous system regulation tool, because it helps to put the body through the stress cycle. I mean, there's like a long list of things. Some of them are backed, some of them are just people are like like the whole like bath thing that's so trendy right now. It's like it's not healing your chronic illness. Like it might be helping with certain things, but like we go too far into like these things that are like
Okay.
holistically healing us, and it's not. It might be helping. It does help with inflammation, because it helps to increase circulation. Of course, if you're doing it for like anxiety causes can cause inflammation in the body, and so that can help. That's like a really good question, because the body doesn't necessarily have to heat up and go into overdrive to reheat after a cold shower, whereas it might
Interesting.
after
Got
like
you.
drinking. And it's not that like ice is a no always. Like the kind of suggestion is usually like, if you're going to have something cold, having a cup of like warm herbal tea or warm water like next to it, not having like everything. Like we do live in a modern day society, and like people
Yeah.
like Ashley said she loves iced coffee.
I
See,
So like
do.
I drink hot coffees in the summer, and
You do drink hot coffee.
same.
He
You
will
and
drink a
Gio would get along
cappuccino
very well.
all year long. And I love because for me, I don't know, there's just something about I wonder if like in my I don't know, in my like chronic exhaustion of motherhood, that there's something about the cold that feels like a pick me up, right?
Well, so technically, like drinking cold can like a lot of times when I've posted about icing the vagus nerve, like people are like, oh, I'll drink ice water, and like that can help with the like the same stimulation. Again, it's not that you should never drink ice, but like specifically from an Ayurvedic standpoint, if you're having like issues with like too much heat in your system, or your digestion is sluggish, one
Yeah.
of the things they're going to look at is, are you drinking iced drinks,
Gotcha.
predominantly iced drinks.
Now, question on like, okay, because like you said, and this is something I think is really important. obviously, like you said, we, Western society, but mostly white people, we take these things, right? And we pull out the parts that we want and the parts that we think are enlightening
Appealing.
for us or appealing for us or like going to be life changing for us. And we're not really interested in the history. We're never really interested in the community. We're never interested in like anything that comes with it. We see this with Black culture literally all the time. Like
All the time.
literally right now, everyone pulls from drag culture. Like if you've ever said, yes, girl, or yes, queen, or if you, God forbid, call anyone sis, you're pulling from drag.
Don't do that, by the way.
I know, please don't. Please don't. Oh my God. I'm probably some white person who's listening to this is probably going to feel bad because people love to call me sis. And I don't always tell you not to say that because I don't have the energy, but Amrit just told you, don't say that shit. I'm not your sis. But like, if you're saying that, right, and you're not paying attention to what's happening to the LGBTQ plus community right now,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's kind of what we're talking about. So, question for Ayurveda specifically, and I want to talk a little bit about yoga too.
Okay.
But in your opinion, is there a way to utilize these ancient practices? Like, I guess, what is the best way to both, if you're like, I want to oil pull,
Yeah.
right? Like, what else comes with that? What do you do?
I think so. I have a really good friend. She's in the UK. Her name's Nikki, and her whole platform is decolonizing yoga, and she's an indigenous teacher and talking about how to respectfully do yoga and
Mm,
like what is disrespectful. And her and I have this conversation a lot because the kind of yoga I grew up doing, the guy literally invented and said it was an ancient practice, and it wasn't. Like he literally like created it. I
no
can't find
way.
any history of it like in
Wow.
India. He kind of combined things. And so like her and I have this conversation a lot. Actually, we were chatting today. Because like somebody commented on one of her Instagram posts being like, well, what if I'm in a city where there's not an indigenous teacher, or like it was a white woman just like being combative.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, can we just not do yoga? Because that's the response is like, oh, somebody's trying to take something away from me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think some things just aren't for you. And I think when you're on an anti-racism journey, one of the most important questions to ask yourself is this for me? Like, can I appreciate it on someone else? Can I honor it and respect it? Is this for me? And if the answer is maybe it is for me, then how can I do it without monetizing off of it, without like stripping it of its culture and its core values and places that it comes from. So I think like it's I'm hesitant as a white woman to answer the question because there could be a lot of different people who have different answers.
Yeah.
Um,
That's real.
but my friend Nikki says, yes, yoga is for everybody, but we need to like honor its roots. It is part of a religion, and you can't really do it without also honoring that religion. And I think so with Ayurveda is looking for books written by indigenous Ayurvedic practitioners. Of course, your teacher doesn't necessarily need to be an indigenous like Indian teacher, but where did they learn from?
Right.
Are they honoring like making sure that their teachers, like making sure the culture is being respected and instilled in the practice.
Right.
And like with Ayurveda, I would say like finding books that are written by indigenous practitioners, websites. Like it's really common now. People say like to oil pull with coconut oil. That's not traditional. Traditionally, you pull with untoasted sesame oil, which is the way I've always done it. I think it tastes better. You don't have to soften it in your
Wow.
mouth, which makes me want to gag.
No
Like
way.
traditionally, you're supposed to do it for 15 to 20 minutes, and when it came out, like I don't know, like 8 years ago or
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
people were making like little individual packets and being like, just swish for 2 minutes. It's not going to do anything if you swish for 2 minutes. Like the whole idea is that it mixes with the enzymes in your saliva and helps to pull toxins out of your system. So like there's a whole history behind it and where it came from. Ghee, one of the most amazing like fat sources, according